Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Electric Avenue. We're so excited to be with you all today, and I'm Mary Lynn Gaylor-Baird, and providing interpretation today is Margie Prop, and we are so grateful to her for her services. Okay, we good? Joining me today are key leaders in our community from Lincoln Public Schools, the University of Nebraska, Lincoln Electric System, and Lancaster County, and I'll be introducing them individually throughout the afternoon. And in celebration of Earth Day, we are unveiling our Climate Smart Collaborative, a local interagency collaborative that's committed to working together toward shared resiliency and sustainability goals. And as a team, we intend to fortify public infrastructure, transition to sustainable solutions, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and utilize renewable resources as part of our larger goals of strengthening our organization's operations and protecting our community's way of life. We will be working cooperatively in many areas, including energy efficient buildings, waste management and recycling, healthy local food, responsible procurement, land stewardship, and water conservation. And these areas align with our city's climate action plan, the first of its kind in the state of Nebraska, to prepare for and mitigate the challenges we would face in a climate-altered future. As part of this plan, we set an ambitious goal community-wide for our community to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions 80% by the year 2050, and that's relative to 2011 levels. In terms of progress to date, I'm really pleased to report that we've already achieved a 25% reduction in emissions relative to 2011 levels, and many people in this room have made that happen. However, the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Vehicles that are dependent on fossil fuels and internal combustion engines increase emissions while also releasing toxins and pollutants into the air. The good news is, to protect our health, to ensure our air quality, and reduce greenhouse gases and other toxic emissions, our climate action plan included a goal to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels by transitioning 100% of city fleets to electric, renewable, or alternative fueled by 2040. So we jump-started this transition last fall when we signed an administrative policy. I signed an administrative policy directing all City of Lincoln departments involved in vehicle purchases to decarbonize their fleets to meet our 2040 goal. And this transition is already underway. With the combined support of $7 million in local, state, and federal funding, the City of Lincoln has a cleaner fleet today that includes nearly 2/3 of StarTran buses and 117 green light fleet vehicles. And I want to acknowledge and thank my counterparts in the City Council, Councilmember Tammy Ward, Councilmember Sandra Washington, who are here with us today for their support in making that transition get started. Thank you so much for your efforts. Vehicles that improve air quality are quieter, they save on fuel and maintenance costs, and they reduce greenhouse gas emissions by thousands of tons per year, and they provide the same level of performance, and in some cases they outperform older fossil fuel-based vehicles. So EVs not only perform and protect our community and the environment, they strengthen our energy independence, and recent world events have continued to starkly demonstrate the importance of not relying on foreign powers for our energy. Increasing energy security, reducing fuel costs, limiting greenhouse gas emissions, preserving air quality, and protecting our quality of life. These are the things we have the power to advance locally when we access more renewable sources of energy to fuel our government cars, trucks, and buses. And as sustainable technologies become more efficient and affordable, and as clean energy investments rise, there's also tremendous opportunity to spur economic development and create good-paying jobs in green manufacturing right here in Nebraska. So today I am proud to announce that we are accelerating our efforts toward a cleaner, healthier, more efficient, and secure transportation future. This month, the Climate Smart Collaborative launched an electric vehicle readiness plan to develop a county-wide strategy for the deployment of electric charging infrastructure. And the EV readiness plan will evaluate suitable areas for charging stations to power our government fleets, as well as assess EV opportunities for businesses, residents, and visitors to Lincoln. And by working together on this plan, we will create synergy in design and coordinate closely during construction, and we will also increase our collective buying power during the purchase and contracting phase to save tax and ratepayer dollars. Additionally, we will work in partnership to leverage federal infrastructure funds designed to build a nationwide EV charging network that will run through Nebraska. Right here in the heart of America, we are kicking the tires. And we are taking action to set an example of the change we want to inspire in our community, both now and for future generations. And there is no time like the present to act to protect what is most precious to us, our children, and our environmental legacy will be left with them. And like our children, zero-emission vehicles are the future. I'm proud to say that we are accelerating our efforts toward a cleaner, healthier, more secure transportation future. And with that, please help me welcome LPS Superintendent Dr. Steve Joel, who will share more details about the EV Readiness Plan, how Lincoln Public Schools is working towards sustainability goals, and how children in our community are taking the lead and inspiring action. Dr. Joel?
Thank you, Mayor. What a privilege to be out here. Just congratulations to Kevin Wales and LES and the City of Lincoln. What a great facility this is, and wonderful location. We heard you might be our neighbors when we started building more middle school, and we really hoped we'd get good neighbors, and I think we did. So anyway, congratulations to all. Lincoln Public Schools has a long history of sustainability initiatives, including energy-efficient facilities, recycling and composting programs, and of course, engaging youth that are passionate about these topics. And now, as a part of this Climate Smart Collaborative, we're excited for the first step of taking a deeper dive into the greening of our fleet vehicles. Lincoln Public Schools was very fortunate to receive grant funding from the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy and Lincoln Electric System to install our first electric vehicles charging stations at all 6 high schools and the operations building in 2020. We are also in the process of purchasing our very first electric fleet vehicle for LPS and hope for that number to grow in the coming years as we learn from and partner with these other community leaders. That is why LPS was happy to serve as the lead agency in the procurement for the development of a collaborative electric vehicle readiness plan. Olson and Associates is the consultant that will now be leading us through the process of developing this plan and preparing us to take advantage of funding opportunities. LPS prides itself on being a sustainability leader in the community, especially because we feel such a close connection to the responsibility to protect our environment for our future generations. We are also fortunate to witness and support student leaders who are passionate about climate issues and ready to take action. And on a personal note, it truly is a privilege to live in a community that's on the leading edge of so many of these kinds of initiatives that are designed to make living in Lincoln, Lancaster County, and state of Nebraska even better than what it is. So with that, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Joel. Thank you so much for your leadership. And next up, I would love to welcome UNL Chancellor Ronnie Green to share how the university and its students are leading the way toward building a climate-resilient future. Chancellor?
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here today. And like Steve said, ditto, Kevin, congratulations on this wonderful facility at LES. And to be here today as part of this collaborative between the city and the county, local government, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and LES. You know, we have been working on the sustainability, environment, and resilience area at the university for a number of years. We actually put in place in 2020 our first strategic plan as an institution in this area that was led by our faculty and students in the development of that plan. And like you heard Mayor say earlier, we have many of exactly the same goals that you heard Larian describe. UNL is a big place. I think you probably all recognize that. And while the nucleus of UNL, as I refer to it, is here in Lincoln with the 3 campuses that we have on City Campus and Innovation Campus and East Campus, we also are a statewide institution where we are the biggest single entity in the state in terms of facilities and in locations spread throughout all 93 counties of the state of Nebraska. We are particularly excited about the electric vehicle readiness plan and moving into that. I want to describe to you a little bit about where we are in that process at the university as well. We have a fleet of about 1,000 vehicles at UNL, about a $2 to $3 million annual spend on vehicles, and as we replace those, the opportunity for electric vehicles has become important to us, and like you heard Steve say a moment ago, we have our first ones in place on campus, both in parking and transit. In fact, I think one of them is here today from our parking and transit operations, as well as our UNL, well, right here to my side. I didn't see it when I walked in. There it is. And our UNL Police Department as well has its first vehicle in place. And we've been very pleased that we have been able to put charging stations in place on both East and City campuses, as well as Innovation Campus in our start. We do recognize that there's some challenges, right, in terms of electric vehicles being able to handle that kind of network of facilities that we have, and are looking forward to the opportunity to reduce those challenges, both in terms of having the charging stations needed. Think of I-80 for us in particular around that range of distances that we have traveling and needs together. We are also very pleased in being able to move forward here that procurement and collaboration in procurement, that all of the entities here have access to the procurement apparatus of the university, which helps us as we move forward in thinking about that transition of the fleet of vehicles ahead. So again, excited to be here today, excited about the launch of this, Mayor, in this first phase of the Climate Collaborative. And I'll turn it back to Mayor Larry.
Thank you, Chancellor. And at the heart of Lincoln's Climate Action Plan is a collaboration with our publicly owned Lincoln Electric System, which is committed to achieving net zero carbon dioxide production from its generation portfolio by the year 2040. And a critical partner in the electrification transformation, I'd like to invite LES CEO Kevin Wales to share more about sustainability, decarbonization, and the continued reliability of our electric grid.
Thank you, Mayor. LES has a long history of working with the city, the university, with Lancaster County, with LPS on conservation, efficiency, emerging technologies. And the Climate Smart Collaborative is just kind of one more step in that process and consistent with that. As the mayor said, in late 2020, the LES board adopted a very aggressive decarbonization goal of achieving net CO2 emissions from the power production resources by 2040. But notwithstanding that goal, the culture of the organization of LES has always been to pursue really environmental types of activities that are consistent with the values of our community. And we believe this is consistent with that and pursuing that. Electric vehicles, as the mayor indicated before, are a key part of this process because the bulk of, right now, the major part of CO2 emissions is coming from internal combustion engines and vehicles and transportation. So this process of talking about the EV readiness study is very consistent with trying to approach the decarbonization issue for the entire community and address climate change in what is a very strong way. LES's engagement with respect to electric vehicles dates clear back to the 1980s when we hosted a study for the Department of Energy, or one of the sites for that, with respect to electric vehicles. And we've had a lot of activity in between there. not the least of which was the first public charging station in the community in 2014. Steve mentioned, Dr. Joel mentioned the charging stations at the schools. We partially helped fund those, as well as some at the university as well, as a part of getting those into the community to make sure that we are approaching the electric vehicles appropriately. More recently, we conducted a 2-year study with respect to residential electric vehicle charging, so we knew how that was going to actually match up with what our facilities do in the community to make sure we're ready as we go forward and see a higher saturation of vehicles in the community. And we also started a somewhat unique program of having, it was piloted, to provide an incentive to customers to make sure that they were charging at times that were not peak load times for the utility. Because clearly what you don't want to do is add to load, having to have more generation. You want to find ways to make the electric vehicles complementary to our goals of decarbonization. And interestingly enough, that project and that pilot was active during Winter Storm Uri, when we had those very extreme cold temperatures, and we were requesting at that point that those customers not charge their vehicles at those times that would have been peak load times associated with that. Last summer, we held the first full-scale electric vehicle ride and drive event in Nebraska, and it was really, I think, a huge success, giving people exposure to electric vehicles that might not feel comfortable going to a dealership or finding other ways to access them. And so it's trying to make sure that we provide that educational opportunity that we believe is very important as well. At this time, for example, over 75% of LES passenger fleet is either hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric vehicles. And right now we have all 3 models of the electric vehicle pickups that are in production, in early production. We have them pre-ordered. Now, part of that is obviously to see how the technology performs. Part of it is to help encourage that technology. But there's another piece of that is we want to see in a fleet application how it works for us, and then we can provide feedback and input to our customers as they're dealing with trying to put electric vehicles into their fleets in different kinds of applications as well. You know, the EV Readiness initiative is really just the first formal program of the Climate Smart Collaborative. But I think, not unlike what Steve said, I think it's really typical of what this community does, in that we all work together to find solutions to very big problems. And I think this is an example of that. This is just the first part of that phase of that with respect to the initiative. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Kevin. I bet everyone's going to be wanting to ride in one of those Rivians you've got ordered. I've also asked County Commissioner Sean Flowerday to address the critical needs of our rural communities and how our EV readiness plan can be shaped to allow reliable access to electrification across the county. Commissioner Flowerday.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all my colleagues who are committed to our local partnership and a climate-smart future. The time is now for meaningful change to replace fossil fuel dependence with clean, local, alternative fuel and energy choices. That requires an emphasis on local, renewable energy development, which Lancaster County and the City of Lincoln have been working hard to support. Now more than ever, sustainable technologies are more efficient and affordable. Clean energy investments spur economic development, create jobs, grow the GDP, and slow the pace of climate change. The energy industry is in a unique position to help solve our climate challenges by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to clean, renewable sources of energy, and transforming our world. We hold the power to strengthen our communities, protect our way of life, and create a stronger, more resilient future for our children and grandchildren. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is one of the largest long-term investments in our infrastructure and economy in history. It provides $550 billion over 5 years in new federal investments in roads, bridges, mass transit, and broadband. We are seeing historic investments in federal recovery funding and infrastructure dollars for electric vehicle infrastructure to serve both urban and rural areas. This new tranche of federal funding is aimed to accelerate the clean fleet transition and support the deployment of zero-emission vehicles to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All Lancaster County residents, regardless of where they reside, should have access to EV charging infrastructure. Rural electric rural electric mobility will be key in supporting this fundamental shift in transportation infrastructure. The U.S. Department of Transportation reports that rural parts of our country are home to 20% of Americans and almost 70% of America's roads. Since residents in rural areas must drive farther to access services, ensuring EV readiness in rural communities will help reduce the hefty costs of fuel consumption while also decreasing environmental impacts. We're very happy to be partnering with all of our colleagues here, all of our partners, and we're just glad to be on the team. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner. In 1931, Thomas Edison purportedly told his friend Henry Ford, quote, "I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. I wish I had more years left." And just as Mr. Edison ran out of time, we too are racing against the clock. Yet here is proof that by working together, sweeping change is possible. We have formed together this Climate Smart Collaborative to channel our individual energy and our collective power to innovate and problem solve to address the climate crisis. And we are uniquely positioned to help solve our climate challenges by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to clean energy, committing to zero emissions technology, and doing our part locally to effect change needed globally. Together, we have the power to strengthen our communities, protect our way of life, and create a stronger, more resilient, more electric future for our children and grandchildren. And so thank you so much for being here today to celebrate this announcement with us. We'd be happy to take any questions.
So what kind of federal and state funding is available that you guys plan to use for this?
Well, Commissioner Flaherty was referencing some of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law dollars. They are specifically a specific purpose that has been designated, so there's money coming down to our state from the federal government, and we are going to be looking to be competitive for those dollars. And as the larger federal goal is to build a network across the state, we want to make sure that we are accessing funds to have a strong network locally here in our community. I mean, I think this potentially has the potential to be more regional if we work with our partners up and down the I-80 corridor, but we're starting in our community. How can we be ready? How can we pull down dollars for charging stations and other infrastructure that's going to allow us to support the electrification of vehicles across our country?
And then in terms of charging stations, are you guys looking, are they only going to be on at public facilities, or is there a private business component to this as well in terms of partnerships?
Well, we're launching this readiness plan to determine sort of what is the most strategic investment of dollars for charging stations. We are, of course, all public entities. You heard Kevin, and maybe he'll want to speak to but the work that's being done to identify sort of what are the solutions for households. We know that for people to purchase electric vehicles, convenience is an important factor, and of course being able to charge at home helps with that convenience. So we want to make sure that we're doing our part from the public side, but also that they're preparing our electric grid to handle increased demand in private homes and households that will rely on LES for power. Did you want to address that? Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. We're so pleased to be here with you today. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Margie.